Welcome to day 14 of our 30-day Pranayama challenge, the subtle secrets of Pranayama. I've been talking about different kinds of pranayama, different kinds of ways that you can breathe to use with other pranayama techniques. For example, we talked about the 360-degree breath that kind of starts at the solar plexus and moves through the whole torso. We talked about belly breath, and we also talked about Dirga Pranayama, which is a 3-part breath. All of those are kind of like really classic pranayama techniques that I remember learning years and years ago. And I also learned many of those techniques that were, I learned them as a way to use breathing in asana practice. And it wasn't until I really started to study the science of breath and understand the application of breath in asanas that I realized that most of those breathing practices are just not a good idea during asana practice. Asana practice requires a different kind of pranayama, and the best practice for asanas is kind of like, I think everything is like 80-20. Like 80% of the time, for 80% of the people, this practice works, and then in 20% of the time, for 20% it doesn't. So, it's not, there's never this like universal thing, but I do find that structural breath is an excellent breath for helping to maintain structural stability, particularly for the lower back in asana practice. So today I'm going to talk about structural breath, and I would welcome your comments and questions. One other thing before I get into the theory, get into the technique. Please know that I'm doing a workshop this Saturday and Sunday here in Asheville. That's called the Neurobiology of Embodiment. I still have a few spots left in it. I would love you to join me. So let me know if you're interested. Just send me a message or an email. Okay, so let's talk about structural breath. So first of all, one of the things you might remember about structural breath about breathing is that when you first breathe in, the breath diffuses in these upper tissues of the lungs primarily, right? So with structural breath, what you're trying to do is accentuate that. So as you breathe in, not here in the scalenes and the SCM, that's not what we're going for this, we're going for here. And you probably could see my scalene, my SCM firing a little bit there, but for the most part, it's here. And then into the armpits, and then in the upper back. So you want to feel, and with structural breath, you want to feel like your rib cage is a hot air balloon that's lifting up out of the hips, right? So it's kind of like, can see that, right? And then the last part of the inhale, that's when you let the belly go. So this is very different from belly breath. And I want to tell you that when I first started doing structural breath, I hated it because it contradicted everything that I had learned and that I had been applying from yoga for years and years. I learned it in the early 2000s from one of my teachers, Gary Crafso, so that it comes out of the Vinaya Yoga lineage, and it's a very structured breath. There's a lot of it takes a little while to get it. So if you first start doing this and you're like, no, I like belly breathing, which is what I did, then you're kind of not giving it a chance. And what I learned with this kind of breathing and with this kind of application and practice is that it's very hard to make a judgment based on one experience. You need to do it over and over again. It really took me a couple of years to really understand the benefits of structural breath. And that's what yoga is about. It's like a lifelong exploration, so you can enjoy learning different things about yourself as you're trying these different techniques. So don't just write off the technique if it feels weird at first, because it did to me. So when you're breathing in that initial inhale, you want to feel in the lungs, under the arms, in the upper back, and then the belly releases at the end. And then as you exhale, you actually start from the pelvic floor. It's not like a tightness. It's more of a tone, or sort of an engagement from pelvic floor to lower abdomen to navel, and even up into the chest, just sort of letting the breath release. So the exhale is just as important. I haven't been talking about the exhale much, right? I've been talking about like sliding down the banister and just letting the exhale go, but now we've got a real active exhale, and that active exhale is going to be really supportive as you do asana practice. If you come to any of my trainings or any of my workshops, I always help people to understand and to learn how to do structural breath as a way to help them support their body in asana practice, right? So as you inhale, you feel this 360-degree hot air balloon lifting up out of the hips. I hope you're practicing as I'm talking. And as you exhale, a little engagement that starts in the pelvic floor diaphragm and then moves up to the respiratory diaphragm. You can even feel it reverberate up into the thoracic diaphragm, right? So, or the, I forget what it's called, but the diaphragm of the throat. So let's do a couple more. Breathing, lifting the ribs up out of the hips, and then exhaling from the pelvic floor as if it's going up this way. And so you're following the, actual mechanical movement of the breath. It's coming in, diffusing, and then the belly releases and then going out until you get to the very end. And I think that kind of visualization can be really helpful. So feel free to leave a question or comment about structural breath. So happy that you're here. And I'll be back tomorrow and we'll continue our conversation about the subtle secrets of pranayama. Namaste.